Rick Broering, do you have any thoughts on any of this?
Slayer Bowl.
What?
I believe that's a bowl game, right? The Tax Slayer Bowl.
Of course.
Yeah, what about you? Is that your favorite bowl?
I think so. I'd say it's top 3 for me.
What's the other 2?
I can't disclose that at this time, Paul.
Okay, that's fine.
To Elliot's point, bowl games suck. I mean, he's absolutely right. Bowl games suck.
Thank you, Rick.
They're meaningless.
Elliot, you want to talk to Rick?
Rick.
Elliot has been talking to me all week, just chomping at the bit, waiting for this interview. It's Friday at 10:30. Here you go. Elliot.
Rick, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm good. I'm a zebra guy. I think
you.
the zebra zillionaires are I'm looking to make a lot of money this week. I feel success coming.
Thank you. By the way, I worked with Rick. I was producing games for NKU, the Horizon League champions. Rick, you promised me a Horizon League championship ring. Where is it?
I'm still waiting on those, Elliot. I believe they're in the mail.
Okay, all right. Then I guess we'll just I'll wait. I'll keep waiting, but as time goes by, I mean,
you don't see any rings on my hand.
It's okay. Not right now, I don't. But I think you're hiding them. You and Kelch are storing them somewhere. I don't know where, but you're hiding them.
Where do you think
I
Jim
might
Kelch
do that, but my
stores
good
one of
friend
those
Jim
rings?
Kelch would never.
Yeah.
I don't know where Kelch stores them, but I know Rick's got them.
Rick, first off, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate it. We have a lot of people here in the chat that are anxiously awaiting a little. Let's start a little bit with college basketball, because we haven't talked about that in a long time. Probably maybe since the last time you came on and kind of got an overview of what's going on around here. So for everybody that's maybe paying attention to what's going on right now, summer recruiting schedule is been ebbs and flows here lately. So between Xavier and UC. Can you just kind of give everybody an update of we'll start with Xavier and then go to UC, of where everybody's at and what's going on right now in the local landscape?
Oh, jeez. Where do you want me to start? Because we've only had about 3 months worth of transfer portal news.
Let's just get the very top. What people need to know.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me that I'm looking at right now is this is about to be one of the most interesting basketball seasons from a storyline standpoint in local memory. I mean, I'm covering Xavier, obviously. I think they're probably the least interesting local team this year. And that's a team that's replacing most of their roster, kind of doing a rebuild after running it back with a lot of the same guys last year. And they've got one of the best coaches in the sport who's entering his second year in Sean Miller. They've got a few high-level freshmen coming in as well. I'm really excited to see Trey Green, who was a top 65 point guard in the class and one of the best shooters in the country. So I think that's where you start with Xavier, and then it just gets more interesting from there. UC, I find fascinating this year. They've completely reshaped that roster. I think the big key for me with UC is, do the 2 big guys get their waivers to play immediately? Assis Bandago and Jameel Reynolds, the 2 big man transfers that they added, could be huge additions to what Wes Miller wants to do this season, especially as they move into the Big 12. But if those guys aren't eligible to play right away, then you're back in a spot where I think you're seeing a lot of Victor Locken playing the 5. Maybe Seamus Lukosius coming over from Butler is playing the 4 more. And I think you get into more of an undersized situation as you go into the Big 12. And that's probably not ideal for them. So I'm really looking at the waivers coming through on those 2 big men when we talk about UC. And then I always include Kentucky in the local teams because I think so many of the fans up here are UK fans, at least the people that I talk to and grew up around are. So Kentucky's probably the most interesting storyline out of all of them. You've got a lot of things converging this year with the John Calipari storylines of the fan base getting restless with him and feeling like he's past due to have more postseason success than he's had. You've got this incredible freshman class that he's brought in, probably the best he's had in his career at UK to this point. And yet they're trying to still put it together a roster here at the last minute, just 2 weeks before they head to Canada. They added 2 new players just this past week. So I think this UK team is certainly going to be one to follow as we lead up to the season, but I'm really excited to get the college basketball season going.
I'm sick of hearing people saying that Calipari is going to be fired. He's not going to be fired. He's not. That's just not on the table. But I do think that there's going to come a point here where maybe he's not fired, but he's got to do something.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta use your Lexington translator, Paul. They don't understand concepts in big words, so they say fire Cal, but really what they mean is eventually we'll just have to run him out of here because we hate him so much, which is a possibility despite his giant buyout. I do think this year, if he were to not make the NCAA tournament, I'm of the belief that he would end up resigning and walking away. I just don't think you'd be able to stay at Kentucky, and that would be a tenable situation if they failed to make the tournament again this year.
I mean, there's no way they miss the tournament with this roster, right?
I wouldn't think so. Definitely not. And that's why I'm saying. I mean, that's a worst-case scenario.
But does like an 8 or 9 seed playing a 1 seed and getting run out of town, does that cut it? Does that even qualify as making the tournament for that fan base?
I don't think so. And that's what I say. Not making the tournament is where you start talking about Cal needs to leave. And then I think there are a few more scenarios from there, like the one you just laid out, which is going to have the fan base pretty riled up. So now, that being said, he did just land a big 2024 commit already for next season, a top 50 center. We'll see if he stays in the 2024 class or if he joins them this year because they might need a little extra help in the front court. But yeah, I mean, it's always tough to fire Cal when he's got one of the top 2 or 3 recruiting classes in the country coming in the following season. But that could be the situation we find ourselves in after this year if things don't go well.
Rick hosts the Skinny Podcast with Richard Skinner of Local 12, and it's a great local podcast. I'd highly recommend anybody wants to go check it out. It's good for local sports and everything. Digestible. It's quick. It's less than an hour every week. Skinny's very entertaining. Not that you're not, Rick, but we have
no,
you
Skinny
on
is very entertaining.
But Skinny is very entertaining. But you guys have obviously been talking a lot lately about the Reds, and we haven't had you on since the Reds have been good. And I remember probably back in late April, right around when the Reds were 7-15, right around that mark, and you guys did an episode. I think they were 3 games under 500. They had lost a series, and you guys did a Skinny pod, and you asked Skinny the question, do the Reds ever get back to 500 this season? And both of you unequivocally, very quickly said, absolutely not. Like, this is not the season that they turn things around. This is not. And that's what I believe. Jacob, Elliott, Casey, Reed. I mean, I think anybody that had a brain at that point and looked at the Reds roster would tell you the Reds were not going to get back to 500. Could they get over their win total of 65.5? Probably. But to 82 wins, that's a lot. Now look at where we are. Halfway through the season, the Reds are tied for first place in the NL Central. Rick, your thoughts?
They got me. I was wrong. I mean, Paul, the way they approached this offseason and then coming into the year, do you remember that Jason Vossler was on this team?
I remember sitting, Rick, I remember sitting doing the Chatterbox opening day show down at Moorline, and we were there, 3-4 hours before opening day. Nick Kirby was sitting to my left, and they released the opening day lineup. And I saw Vossler. I had never heard that name. I didn't know how to pronounce it. I didn't know if it was Vossler, Vosslier. I didn't know what it was. And he said, Jason Vossler, he's in the starting lineup on opening day. And I said, yeah, that's what I'm reading right here. And now here we are, tied for first place.
I was at Smoke Justice that day, and there was an audible buzz around the building going, who the hell is Vossler? I remember that distinctly. Who is this Vossler guy? So that was the big memory we had to look back to on opening day. And the talk was like, maybe Nick Lodolo and Hunter Green and Graham Ashcraft will start forming some semblance of a top of the rotation this year to give the fans something to look forward to as we head into a window that would seem like they'd be able to compete. And all of a sudden you start bringing up some of these young position players and they completely turn things around. So this has been incredibly fun to watch. But if you've been listening to the Skinny Podcast, I'm also of the belief that fans need to pump the brakes a little bit. Just enjoy what's happening right now. Enjoy the fact that they're ahead of schedule and quit worrying so much about giving the entire farm system away just to improve to make the playoffs this season.
So what do you think they do? I mean, that's been the topic of conversation here for the last 2 or 3 weeks where we're trying to, figure out, okay, you're going to get into a situation now in June or in July where you play the Brewers 6 times. And after that 6-game stretch against the Brewers, they don't play the Brewers 3 more times the rest of the season. That's it. After that 6 games bookending the All-Star break. So you don't have a ton of time to make up ground with the team that you're potentially competing with to win the division. Maybe the Cardinals make a run at some point. They look kind of dead. Maybe the Cubs hang around. Who knows how they play throughout the home stretch of the season. But if it's the Reds and the Brewers, you only have 9 games left against them, and 6 of those are back-to-back-to-back-to-back-to-back-to-back-to-back. So what do you think this team can or should do going here into July and the trade deadline?
Well, they should be trying to improve the pitching staff like everyone wants them to. But the reality of being able to improve the pitching staff and improve it to the point that you would not only make the playoffs, but be capable of making a run in the playoffs is, just not all that realistic to me this season with what you have to work with, unless you're going to be giving up guys like CES and Noel V. Marte. And if you give up those two guys, that might return you a top of the rotation type guy. But that's one. This pitching staff right now, Paul, has 4 healthy pitchers. And as Richard Skinner said so eloquently yesterday on our podcast, 3 of them suck. So that's the issue that they're faced with right now. One top of the rotation pitcher is great, but you're willing to give up some of your top prospects for one pitcher that might not be enough to get you over the hump that you need this year. I'm not willing to do that. I want a 2, 3, 4-year window with this group of core young guys. And if that means standing pat this year and missing the playoffs by a few games, or just getting into the playoffs and not being able to win that first series, I'm fine with that, because what this season is proving to me right now is that they can go all in next year. Spend some money in free agency. Maybe next year you look at getting rid of a guy like Jonathan India in the offseason. I've heard you guys talk a lot about that. I'm not against trading a guy like Jonathan India, but why don't you wait until you've seen most of a season from some of these young guys that McClain and LaCruz and Steer and maybe a guy like CES even are actually major league caliber hitters and are going to do it for the course of an entire season. If you get through this season and you still feel the same way about all these guys, like we've got a log jam in the infield, we've got to move one of these pieces, then package Jonathan India with somebody and move him. But right now, I don't think that's what they should be focused on. I think you try to get the best deal you can for a middle of the rotation type pitcher, whether that means Nick Senzel and one of your really young low level guys that you're not as focused on in the minor league system, or it's maybe you're just taking on an expiring contract and paying most of that and giving them one of your major league guys who isn't really in the plans for the future. I'm not sure, but that's what I'm looking for, is a bargain deal, another team that's kind of desperate to get rid of an expiring contract to get you through this year, hopefully get you a little closer to the playoffs. But I'm not giving away any young pieces of value just yet.
Rick, a couple more questions for you. Any thoughts just where we're at now? It's kind of a dead period with the Bengals and everything else going on right now as they kind of turn their attention toward training camp coming up here in a few weeks. But do you have any overall thoughts? You can say no, but I'll give you the floor. Anything on the Bengals here just casually before the season gets going? We flip the calendar to July.
No, I just think there's so much talk about Joe Burrow's contract right now, and that's just one thing that I could honestly care less about. Or I could not care less about it, because he's going to get signed, and it's going to be for a ton of money. He'll be the highest paid quarterback ever. Quit worrying so much about that. Yes, there is concerns about how the deal is structured and how many guys will be able to be signed in terms of his wide receivers and keeping that core together after you make that deal. But the constant conversation about, is Joe Burrow's deal going to get done, to me is just completely pointless and mind-numbing. I'm so sick of hearing about it because, and granted, Skinny and I talk about it as much as anyone, so I fully understand that it's something you kind of have to address right now, especially when there's not a lot going on. But Joe Burrow is going to get signed, and it's going to be a deal that makes sense for both him getting paid as much as any quarterback ever has, and the team having as much flexibility to keep some of his top talent around him.
One last question for you, Rick. There is one member of our chat, and we're going to go back to college basketball for just a second. There is one member of our chat who is, I'm going to assume, an avid Dayton fan, and who has
can't see the chat for the record. Just
No. That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. I'll tee up for it. I'm assuming this person has been or is a Dayton fan because they've been in the chat for months now, trying to understand why Xavier won't schedule Dayton. I have tried to explain that it doesn't benefit Xavier at all to go up to UD Arena. I know a lot of fans want, especially a lot of the older fans, want to reignite the rivalry. A lot of the younger fans couldn't care less because they haven't played Dayton in forever. And I think a lot of the very young fans, especially of my generation, would tell you that a 90-61 Xavier win in November of 2015 is fine with being the last memory of that rivalry. But I have made my point on that. You know as well as anybody, as somebody that did not go to either school and who just covers the college basketball scene, you also know the answer to this. Maybe you can share your thoughts on Xavier and Dayton.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much more I can add other than what you just said, because that pretty much is the story. I don't know why anyone thinks Xavier would care so much about this. Like, it's gone, it's past. I don't know why Dayton fans, quite honestly, care so much about this, because it's not like it's gone well for them. And at this point, if you're a Dayton fan, you're asking to be bought by Xavier, I think. I mean, you can't really think Xavier's going to play a home and home with you at this point. There's no way they would ever go up and play at UD Arena for no reason at all like that. So you're asking to be bought by Xavier and get paid money to come down to Cintas Center and lose. I just don't see that happening. I don't see it making sense for either side. And honestly, I'm kind of bored with the whole thing. Like, I could care less about the UD-Xavier rivalry, a rivalry that was at one time in the A-10 and has passed us by many years ago.
What are your thoughts? Go ahead.
I have one quick question for you, Rick. I have one quick question for you. Who wins in a one-on-one, Jizzle James or Des Claude? They play one-on-one, first to 21. Who wins?
Well, we haven't seen Jizzle play at the college level yet, so that's going to be a little bit unfair. But
many are saying he's the next Michael Jordan. Many.
I think he has a lot of potential. I don't know that he's like the most dynamic scorer coming in as a freshman, so I would probably go Des Claude since he has that experience over him. I think Des Claude is going to have a big year, but Jizzle James is a guy I'm really high on. I'm excited about him for UC.
What about Dan? All right, well, same matchup. Dan Skillings versus Des Claude. We'll go roster by roster. Which Bearcat can beat Des Claude?
Dan Skillings, this is why UC's roster is so interesting, because I could argue that Dan Skillings will be UC's best player this year. And
I agree.
I also don't know that Dan Skillings is going to be in the starting lineup when the season starts.
I agree.
Like, I mean, go through the lineup right now, right? I mean, it's probably, assuming the big men are healthy, you've probably got Assis starting at center, Victor starting at the 4.
Yep.
Then you go to CMOS starting at the 3. And I think if you bring CJ Frederick in, with all those people knowing him as well as they did, I have to imagine a big part of the sell for CJ Frederick to come to UC was, you're going to start for us. I could be wrong, but my guess is CJ Frederick will start at the shooting guard position early in the year. And that way Wes can kind of even dangle the carrot for Dan Skillings a little bit and be like, we need you to get even better, prove even more, work harder, be more consistent, those types of things. And then I assume, do you believe it'll be Jizzle James or Day Thomas starting at the point guard spot, Zebra?
It would be hard for me not to. I'm a Jizzle guy. I'm going to say Jizzle, but I don't think it'll happen. I don't think Jizzle will start.
I typically lean experience in those situations, knowing how coaches think, and I lean Day as well. So if that's your starting lineup, again, you could have Dan Skillings coming off the bench, and it would not surprise me at all this year if he is their leading scorer, their best player. I think he's got a lot of talent. He could be an NBA-type shooting guard.
Okay, sounds like he's better than Des Claude. That's good for me. That sounds like a win for me.
Check that mark.
I was really sad to see Jeremiah Davenport didn't transfer to Xavier. I think he really could have built a couple bricks for you guys. I thought his 3-point game really could have benefited Xavier.
I imagine most UC fans probably felt that way. Yes.
What were your thoughts on Jeremiah Davenport, Zebra?
I think he got a bad rap, but man, there would be times where like he would heat check. He was 0 for 15 in a game, and he would heat check from the logo. He would just heat check from wherever, and it would be air balls, and it would just be like the worst shots. I think he's a good guy. I think UC fans gave him a hard time, but man, there were games where just like he couldn't hit like the rim, just side of the backboard. It was just bad.
As an NKU fan, let me just say, I am sorry to see JD moving on, considering NKU will be playing at UC this year.
What a half that was, 11 points. 11 points for the rest of our lives.
Last year for NKU. Yes.
Were you at that game?
No, I was working the game. So so a little backstory about that game.
How'd that internet sound?
NKU's Wi-Fi broke down in that game, Rick. So we had all our broadcasters calling on cell phones.
I'm aware. I was the one calling to you doing it, if you don't remember.
Well, no, I was on the UC side. So I was working with Mo and Terry and Dan, and those are just professional guys, but they were frustrated because I'd argue NKU might have done that on purpose. Sabotage.
I heard Mo had a few choice words for NKU's facilities that night. But here's the thing, Zebra. You're telling me that NKU's only chance to actually be in the spotlight in the city and have people paying attention to one of their regular season games and have 8,000 fans in there, have multiple media outlets covering it. You think they wanted to not get the coverage? You think they wanted the Wi-Fi to go down? I mean, clearly we're just incompetent and don't know how to do things in Highland Heights.
I think their pride just wanted to beat UC, and they did it. And they did it. That's all they cared about. They didn't care about giving a good product to the people. They just wanted to beat UC, and then we scored 11 points in the second half.
Yeah, it's called focus. You might try it out once in a while.
I remember sitting up in that game. That game was sold out, and I got tickets, and we sat like 3 rows from the top for the first half of that game. And when the Wi-Fi went out, I was looking down at the press row trying to figure out where all the broadcasters were sitting, and it was so crowded. And I saw Rick, and I see Rick doing this. And I look over at my friends I'm with. I'm like, oh, my God, the Wi-Fi probably went out. I bet they're calling the game. Their Comrex probably is down. I bet they're calling the radio station right now and doing the game. Because that's a very relatable problem in, like, minor league baseball or whatever.
Yeah.
You have to, like, call the radio station. I'm going, this is a disaster.
Yeah, it was bad.
Elliot, do you remember how long it took to get back up? Was it halftime?
Yeah, so right at the second half, I think at the second half we were good. But the whole first half was a no-go.
Because what happened was Jim would have the cell phone the entire time. He'd call the entire action for like 4 minutes straight, and then there'd be the media timeout, or dead ball media timeout, and he'd pass the phone off to me. And like we'd have the ads run, and then we'd come back from the media timeout, and I'd just read off like all the stats, give him like another 30-second break, and I'd be like, all right, back to Jim with the play-by-play.
And by the way, that was my first game I ever ran. So that was the very first basketball game I ran for the station, and I didn't know what I was doing. Mo was stressed out of his mind, and I forget who was running. I think it was maybe Austin running for you guys. I forget who ran the NKU side of things, but it was chaos. And then on top of it, my team loses to NKU.
And by the way, scores 11 points in the second half.
And 11 points in the second half.
Can't
That's
forget
tough.
that.
I wonder how many of those points were Davenport's. I'll have to go back and look.
I don't know, but I know there were several of them that he did not score. I do remember that.
Rick, I have a question, last question for you. Somebody in the chat, Alex Wallace, wants to know if you copied James Rapien on your background because it says it's incredibly similar.
I've told you that. I've told you that multiple times. I guess not on here, but I've said it multiple times. Credit to James Rapien. I completely ripped him off. 100%. At least I went black just to not completely steal it, but that was 100% my inspiration. I had a terrible setup in my office, as Paul can tell you. We've been doing podcasts together for a couple years, and it looked like I was podcasting at a Wild Bill sex dungeon in here. So I tried to look at some of the other backgrounds that people looked like they had very limited space to work with. And I thought, James Rapien looks like he's literally sitting inside of his shelves when he does those things. So maybe that setup would work for me. And lo and behold, it did. So if you have anything to send over, I can put on these shelves. That'd be great. Thank you.
We'll get a zebra bobblehead.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, zebra bobblehead would make this studio glow. Make it glow.
Yeah, can it be like a LED one?
Yeah. LED? Is that what you said?
That's hot. Yeah. That's hot in the streets. Yeah, I've seen it on the YouTube channels.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good for you.
Thanks.
Good
Thanks,
for
guys.
you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Rick.
Hey, Rick. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Elliot, hang in there, buddy. They're just yelling louder than you do when you start arguing about Jonathan India. You were on the right side of history there.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you for your support, and I await my Horizon League championship ring.
Yeah, that'll be over in a few weeks, I'm sure.
Okay. All right.
All right. Have a good 4th of July, Rick.
You too, guys. Thank you.
All right. See ya.